but we are seeing some new paradigms, new shifts, and new acceleration in how digital payments are being adopted across the world. If we think about some of the biggest transformations in the last 100 years, they've largely been driven by something being replaced or removed or disappearing altogether. Transformation is often more about removing something, and it's the absence of something. And I'll illustrate that through the conversation that I have with you today. 2020 has marked the beginning of a new transformation by itself, a huge global disruption that the pandemic has caused, the confinement of people that it has generated. And we are all experiencing significant change in our lives, and this is happening worldwide. And I'm sure that while all of us are figuring out how to cope with it, adjust to it, I'm sure it'll ignite a lot of different innovations and transformations too. In this case, what we are beginning to see is the reduction of physical contact, and that has impacted the way we live, we interact with others, the way companies and consumers can relate to each other, and definitely it's making us all the more digital. To give you an idea of the kind of transformation I'm talking about, I'll actually walk you through a few illustrations from long before COVID. And if you remember the time when the early automobiles were invented, when they first showed up, they were actually called horseless carriages. No one knew what car was because the concept was too new. So we adopted a term that was somewhat close, the carriage, modified by the key thing that was being removed from that mode of transport, the horse. We eventually learned what cars were all about and stopped using the placeholder word. And that became a bridge between the past and the future. So that's one illustration. As we go forward in history, one of the things that we've all experienced is technology over time has reduced the distance between people and things, and so on. And if you look at it today, we are all able to meet with each other, converse with each other, talk with each other, hang out with each other at an instant, with a click of a single button, with a lag of much less than a second. And technology continues to do that. When I take the next example, probably well ahead, well before your generation, but cordless phones in home were the beginning of the wireless era. And this allowed for people to walk around the house and talk on a phone. And now we call them just phones. And for the most part, we just say mobile, because their utility has gone far beyond the aspect of making a call. We use the device to take photos, keep in touch with colleagues, make payments, and so on. In fact, the phone has gone from being the thing to being an application on the device that you're carrying. Mobile phones have become personal assistants for the masses and have been the primary driver in the digitization of payments. And as we look ahead at commerce and payments and how it'll evolve, mobile devices, the data that we process, hyper-personalization, ambient experiences, all of these become possible. This will change how we live, how we communicate, and how we work, and how we pay as well. Now, there is a lot in store in terms of commerce payments as we think about the next 5 to 10 years. But let me take you back to 1950. 1950 was the first time a credit card was launched. In fact, it was not even called the credit card. Diners Club called it the charge card. And this is when the payment cards started to first evolve, and it was the beginning of the credit card industry. It was in 1958 that American Express as a company jumped into the payment card scene and launched the first card that was used globally. It was no longer an exclusive club like Diners Club, but American Express took the concept and introduced it to a lot of people. The move to the cards was the first introduction of what it was a hot topic then and continues to be the concept of a cashless society. And in spite of being on the journey for about 70 years now, cash is still the primary way in which people interact. That said, non-cash transactions are growing at the fastest pace ever. There's a lot happening in Asia with respect to this growth, and we're seeing about 29% growth year over year. Over 60% of the payments in developed markets are now digital. Sweden is expected to become the world's first cashless society by 2023. And the move to cashless has been embraced by everyone. In some countries and in some cities like New York and San Francisco, there are laws now being enacted to require companies to still accept cash because cashlessness and the availability of mobile devices is not something everybody has. Most people do, but not everybody has it. Cashless is viewed by certain lawmakers as exclusionary because people can't afford a bank account and so on. One of the things that we've seen in the COVID-19 pandemic is the acceleration of this process. According to a study by the University of Oxford, money is a transmission route for bacteria. Up to 2,600 bacteria on a single banknote. Touch has suddenly become an issue. Currency and coins have become a vehicle for transmission of infection and so on. And while on the one hand, we're all figuring out how to live in this new normal, what we are beginning to see is a definite and ubiquitous acceptance of digital payments all across. And this is happening everywhere, whether it is in stores, whether it is through online payments, or for that matter, even in person through QR codes and so on. When we look at the evolution of commerce itself, in the early days of e-commerce, payments were fraught with so many different challenges. This was 1995 when the internet started to launch, commerce started to move to the internet. I actually happened to work for eBay for many years. I was not there during 1995. I joined them in the year 2000. But outside of the founder, the first employee that was hired at eBay was hired so that they can actually go to the post office, pick up checks, bring them in, process them, and then go deposit them in the bank. So while commerce had moved to the internet, payments had not yet done that. Connectivity was limited. Payments didn't always work. Logistics took too long. Fraud was hard to detect and deter. And consumers couldn't fully trust the people who were on the other side of the computer. Whether they were going to deliver those products or services was not a guarantee. And these were questions that actually were on people's minds when commerce first started on the internet. In other case, or in other words, it was about figuring out how would we make this reliable, competent, honest, and trustworthy for that matter. We've, of course, since 95, we've seen a massive shift in how and where commerce is conducted. If you thought of the last century, most of the shopping was done with you going into a shop. What's beginning to happen now is the shop comes to you, no matter where you are. The years between 1995 and now has seen a steep growth in online and mobile commerce. The creation of new offerings like entertainment, direct-to-consumer subscription services, and so on. And the payments industry has innovated alongside these changes, shifting to allow users to pay for goods and services at every turn, because consumers are mobile and on the go as well. Mobile is also beginning to drive what is called a cardless revolution. So if 1950s was the first time a card was introduced to replace cash, now we are beginning to see the removal of cards from the environment. And as near field communication, NFC, has gotten more popular, you can now literally walk around without a wallet. You can just have your phone and you can pay for things. What's interesting is one of the first generation of cardless payments was actually at PayPal. I don't know how many of you know, but the first product that PayPal built was literally trying to beam money over Palm Pilots. Palm Pilots were a generation of personal digital assistants. They came well before the smartphone did, and they allowed you to do small tasks, but they also had a infrared interface that allowed two Palm Pilots to communicate. And then we moved from that to trying to see if we can send money over email. That was the beginning of where PayPal was. And that was the beginning of a cardless movement in the late 90s, well before today's sophistication and today's technology. And in general, we have largely overcome the barriers to trust that early days of e-commerce had. Digital technologies have definitely disrupted the industry, and they've created entirely new economies and transformed the way we work and we live. Think about how the internet has enabled small businesses to offer up an endless aisles of merchandise. In fact, we think now of the whole world as one endless shelf of goods that's available. Anyone, anywhere, can buy anything from anywhere and pay for it with a vast amount of currencies in scope. It's also a global thing. We as a company operate in 200 different markets and 100 different currencies. Now, as we have done this, what we have realized is the most important thing between a company and its customers is all driven by the concept of trust. Trust that a merchant will actually get paid for the merchandise. Trust that a buyer will actually receive what they paid for. And this trust is, of course, something that has to be earned. And when we build platforms, we have to take into consideration how we build marketplaces that will connect these consumers and merchants, but do it on that foundation of trust. Without trust, you don't have relationships between merchants and consumers. Without trust, you don't have a relationship between platforms and its participants. And to do so, you use a significant amount of innovation and technology, a lot to do with what you do with all the data that you gather, applying big data techniques and machine learning and AI and so on. And as we do this, customers are beginning to ask a lot of questions, good questions, about how their personal data is being collected, how it is being stored, how it is being shared. And at the heart of trusted frictionless payments experience is secure and proper use of data. We do about 30 million transactions on an average day. We do 50 million transactions on a peak day. And behind every transaction is real-time checks that ensure that the payment is safe for the consumer, the payment is safe for the merchant, and the payment is safe for the platform. Within 350 milliseconds, we look at transaction histories of both the merchant and the consumer and ensure that this transaction is going to be safe, secure, and we do the best we can in terms of avoiding fraud. This is the reason we enjoy some of the best fraud rates in the world. Very interesting data problem to solve, and we are at the forefront of that, and we've used these techniques for a long time. Now, in order to harness this data and use it responsibly and at its full potential, there are a lot of boxes that you have to check, such as regulatory compliance, privacy, security. Things like cybersecurity is very important. You know very well that in the world of cybersecurity, there are a lot of threats that are emerging. Good yesterday is not good enough today. And then the concept of fraud. Fraud is different from cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is about the theft of information in a malicious way. Fraud, on the other hand, is somebody showing up almost looking like a legitimate merchant or a legitimate consumer but not honoring the transaction for what it needs to be. Building and maintaining and updating the proper controls that you need to have in ensuring that the data is used in a responsible, ethical way are table stakes today. And this also serves as a competitive advantage in an increasingly complex world that is global and is governed by the regulatory landscape. Every jurisdiction in the world has laws on money. And platforms like us have to make sure that those laws on money are adhered to. We have to innovate in the area of identity, in the area of payments, in the area of risk and fraud, in the area of compliance, how we do credit, how we do pricing, how we do foreign exchange, and so much more. Many very interesting technology problems to solve, all to create business value and connect merchants and consumers around the world through the platform. As we move forward, I talked about how this is becoming a global phenomenon. I talked about how you can think of the world as one large shelf of goods that's available to a consumer anywhere in the world. One other way that we are beginning to see innovation in the area of boundaryless commerce is through technologies like blockchain. And blockchain, for example, has a lot of potential in the area of trust, identity, payments, custody, and so on. And the virtual currency ecosystem is not only a proven way to manage and move money, it provides access to a financial ecosystem without a bank account. There are trillions, tens of trillions of dollars that are exchanged through today's systems. And it costs around 1.8% for a transaction because various players in that ecosystem charge a fee for that money to move from one place to the other. This creates a system where 1.8 billion people around the world are underserved today by the current money movement and management systems. Blockchain offers a ray of hope, one that can help us reach those communities, one that is underserved by today's systems, and one that can actually be supported through tomorrow's technologies. And there is no doubt that cryptocurrencies are still extremely volatile, and they're under scrutiny at so many different levels. While it's lauded for its anonymity and viability as an asset, it has not established itself as a currency yet, outside of the traditional financial infrastructure. Now, that said, there is a lot of promise. We are doing a lot of research in this area and evaluating ways that we can use these technologies to reach that 1.8 billion. And as we do that, digital payments truly start to become boundaryless. The digitization of currency is only a matter of if. Sorry, it's not a matter of if, but it's only a matter of when. And the next decade will see more and more currency get digitized, and more financial technology companies and governments and regulators will slowly support that. You probably heard about the emergence of stable coins, but not just stable coins, but central bank digital coins, as in those stable coins that are released by central banks of a country. And these will be the rails of the future in terms of how money will move, how money will get exchanged, and how it will become more affordable for most people in the world to transact, manage, and move money. So if I've sufficiently convinced you that the biggest advancements in payments and experience in general is going to happen through the removal of things, as you can imagine, payments is eventually up for an act of disappearance. What I mean by this is, long gone are the days when you actually had to stop at the end of a shopping activity and explicitly conduct a payment action. We are now in the world of what I call ambient payments, a world in which shopping or intent is sufficient. Payment doesn't have to be an explicit action. It can be implicit. I'll give you an example. Many of you have probably taken a ride share, like an Uber or a Lyft. Ask yourself the question, when do you pay? And if you think of it for a second, you'll realize you actually don't go through the explicit action of paying. That happens automatically. When you express the intent for a ride and the ride starts, your intent for payment is recorded. When the ride is done, the payment is automatically detected. With this, payments become a little bit more like air, invisible, but always there for your needs. And in this next phase of commerce, the lines will be blurred between consumption, the experiences of daily life, paying for these experiences. Merchants will put in place payment technology that will make commerce a lot more seamless than it is today. I gave you examples like Uber and so on. And it is something that the whole ecosystem will embrace. Consumers, regulators, partners, merchants, and so on. In order for digital currencies to be adopted by consumers, consumers will have to feel that it's safe, secure, convenient method of paying, and have to become involved in this financial ecosystem. I look at the future of digital payments, and I think of it as something that all of you will have a large role to play in. And COVID and the pandemic itself, on top of the already existing acceleration in digital payments, creates more opportunity as well. During the pandemic, we saw one of the biggest quarters of performance for PayPal ever in the history across the 200 markets. And this is giving us an opportunity to start to reimagine what payments will be going forward. On the one hand, we saw a lot of increase in digital kindness through giving that people participated in for charitable giving or helping others in the time of need and so on. At the same time, given everyone is restricted to home, there is a lot more online activity. In fact, what we saw in the beginning of May was activity similar to the Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday. And that's, by the way, extremely massive. Before I open it up to questions and answers, I want to leave you with a final thought. Every summer, we host about 180 college interns at PayPal. And the reason I'm here today is because one of our summer interns, Advai Poduturi, asked me to come and speak with all of you. And I'm here because the future of payments is really going to be in your hands. You have limitless opportunities to shape the next transformation in this journey. And I can't wait to see what all of you come up with. Thank you very much. And with that, let's open it up for questions. Any questions?
Working on the Q&A, thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Shri. It was really nice hearing from you, and I personally took away a lot from that talk. Before we do open it up to the Q&A, I would like to send out the attendance form that we'll be using to distribute our Grubhub gift card giveaway. So I will be attaching the link and code to that in the chat now. This will only be open for about 5 minutes, so please fill that out quickly. And I'll go ahead and paste that now.
So we have a few questions in the chat, Shri. What advancements with PayPal specifically make to improve the future of payments? What advancements is PayPal going to make specifically to improve the future of payments?
Yeah. So there are various things that are happening. We are actually seeing a growth in payment volume by about 25% every single year. I'll start from the bottom and say scalable infrastructure is one of the biggest investments we make in technology. But alongside that, and equally important as priority zero, is the investments we make in cybersecurity and making sure that like our consumers and our merchants are protected and safe the way they need to be. When I think about the edge of advancement, there is a lot we do in terms of the technologies that we use to build platforms and experience. In building the platforms themselves, these are not just robust platforms, but they have to be great APIs to integrate with and such. But when I focus purely on the concept of payments, I see a significant leverage of machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence technologies in the area of risk management, cybersecurity, fraud management, customer service, personalization, and many other spaces. Blockchain has promise, and we have a blockchain research group at PayPal that is looking into various different use cases, not just payments, but well beyond payments, including supply chain and asset custody and things of that nature. We have a couple of researchers who are beginning to look at quantum computing as a piece of technology, primarily with the interest to see how it's emerging and when it becomes commercially viable and usable as well. To me, what I'm most excited about is more in terms of the user experience, which I think probably goes a little bit into the second question that we have here. What do you think is going to be different about payments in 5 years? I already talked about the concept of ambient payments. Ambient payments is where the payment activity itself is not explicit, it's implicit. It goes into the background, it starts to disappear, and so on. But with the emergence of Internet of Things, devices that are around you, commerce will actually become contextual. Whether it is at your home when you're interacting with various devices around you, or for that matter, inside of your car as you're driving, all of these things will become an extension of your life in a context where commerce can occur. And in doing so, as you can imagine, most of these are not the most convenient interfaces for you to interact with through traditional means like using a keyboard and a mouse and so on. So a lot more voice is going to play a role. Design will play a very critical role in how we build convenient and delightful experiences for our consumers and merchants. And you have to keep in mind that there's a lot that is under the iceberg surface when it comes to payment technologies. The back office in terms of settlements and reconciliation and things of that nature are very important. Regulations are a big deal. We are beginning to see the emergence of the concept of RegTech platforms. And these are to make sure that the ever-changing laws on money in various jurisdictions are something that your system can actually take on and provide for. I think whether it is consumer experience and the evolution of payments to where it becomes completely seamless to where you don't even feel it anymore, or sophisticated work in the area of cybersecurity and what needs to happen to protect information, or for that matter, the work related to privacy to make sure all of the customers' data is managed appropriately based on their consent, only based on their will and so on. There's a ton of work in the technology that provides for a good, robust payment system. But the bottom line is, it is finally about customer centricity. Technology is a means to create value. Understanding your customers, designing well, building great products, iterating and learning. I think that's where the magic really happens. I see the next question as, as many like Elon Musk Neuralink working into a new interface with computers, do you see or plan to make virtual wallet being a bodily microchip? Um, Not necessarily. I don't necessarily think that payments has to cause any kind of mutilation of the human body to become seamless. I think there is a lot of trends at play that we can leverage to where payments can happen seamlessly. Payments can be accessible to everyone. You don't necessarily need to insert a bodily microchip for a wallet. We've, for example, in one of our tech expos, played around with the concept of paying with a face. So using biometrics as a method of identity and using complex biometrics, right? So I think a single fingerprint is one level of identification. 5 of them together make for a more secure signature. The face makes for even more secure signature. Iris makes for an even further more secure signature. So you could actually use appearance rather than needing to have something that's in your body to make a payment. I see a question from Jason. What is the one piece of advice you can give to recent grads, early career software engineers? It's a great question. I don't know of one thing per se, but if I had to prioritize, I'd say most of what you've done through your college is what I call you've learned how to learn. That act of learning by itself is what I'd love for you to continue. Curiosity is what I want to continue to keep. And being curious, I think, will create unbounded opportunities for you. Being curious will make you more competent in the areas that you pursue. Curiosity will allow you to solve problems in innovative ways that nobody else has thought of before. So if I had to prioritize one piece of advice, I would say, no matter what you do, stay curious, continue to learn, and never stop learning. So the next question I see is, I know you mentioned Asia and its transition to cashless payments, Pay Now, Nets in Singapore, WeChat, Pay in China. But what about markets that are primarily cash-based like Japan, especially in rural areas, and seem to be continuing down that road? How is it possible to make these payment systems more accessible? I think there are many trends that are at play that will continue the digitization journey. We have clearly seen through our own numbers and over the last 6 months, the acceleration of digital payments. When you think about the cash ecosystem, there are various players that are motivated to actually figure out how to get to a cashless society. The most interested are actually the governments of countries. Now, why are they interested in making an economy cashless? They're interested in doing so to actually protect and safeguard their citizens. Cash allows for a lot of activity that can, like for example, I'll step back. We do a lot of work in the area of anti-terrorist funding kind of checks and balances, anti-money laundering kind of checks and balances, and so on. The basic mechanics of moving money is not that hard. That's easy to do. But when you take everything in the ecosystem of money that you need to support, there's a lot to do there. And some of these things are things that the governments in various countries want to do, regulators in various countries want to do. And digitization is the best promise we have in making this accessible to that 1.8 billion in population I talked about that is underserved by today's systems. So when you take a confluence of all of these players collaborating together, it's only a matter of time. Number one trend to keep in mind is um, the usage of mobile devices and the affordability of mobile devices is something that has become quite easy. You can now buy a smartphone, a starter smartphone, for less than $25 in most markets. And that creates all kinds of opportunities. It's not just for payments. Um, we've actually seen it create new opportunities in education, new opportunities in connectivity, new opportunities in like literally people interacting with each other to figure out like local supply chains and so on. I've recently heard of a story of fishermen in a rural district who communicate with each other to see where the demand for a certain kind of fish is so that they can get their fish to the market in the right place. So they can sell it in time before it goes stale. Connectivity is creating new opportunities for equalizing things that have been unreachable in the past. I talked about how technology is eliminating distance. Um, and this connectivity, emergence of mobile smartphones, the decrease in prices and therefore affordability of these smartphones gets more and more people to engage in many different things, including digital payments. And then from there, it's the act of platforms like us to make it easy, even over a low bandwidth connection, sometimes without the lack of a connection, to still make payments happen. So yes, there are markets that will move a little slower than others, but again, full digitization is only a matter of when. We will look back someday, and we will look at currency, cash, coins, and notes as a thing that we find in the museums, not in personal use anymore. The next question we have is from Ben. Do you see an evolution of payments past cardless and blockchain? Of course, I think today the world still deals with a lot of variation in the kind of currency that every country uses. There isn't necessarily one global currency per se. I talked earlier about how digitization can actually create a boundaryless ecosystem. Now, that's a long way away. I mean, it's not something that we'll find in the next decade or so. But blockchain as a technology or cardless as a technique are purely methods. At the end of the day, this is about exchange of value. And this started a long time ago. The early evolution of human beings was around barter, things people exchanged with each other and so on. And that eventually went into, okay, you know what? There was not enough demand for everything. There was not enough supply for everything. And the needs of people increased. And so there was this intermediate value exchange mechanism called the currency for goods. We've slowly continued to digitize it, make it more seamless, make it more convenient. That journey will continue to happen to the point, like I said before, where payments as an explicit action start to disappear. You don't realize as you breathe, but you breathe more than you do anything else. And there is going to be a world someday where a exchange of goods will not necessarily require for you to take your wallet out, pull a card out, or actually even take your phone and scan it and such. Presence and digital identity can actually make that even more seamless. I also think that there is a big revolution that's about to happen in the area of privacy. Today, most of us don't fully understand yet why we should have privacy or why that is important and so on. And those of us that have done a fair amount of looking into it, I think privacy is the #1 digital right that any consumer needs to have. So I believe that privacy and therefore advancements in cryptography and the use of information to where you can still personalize an experience for somebody, but don't have to necessarily use down to the actual data that they have, but based on heuristics and things of that nature. There is a lot to do in that space as well. Look, bottom line is innovation never stops. It is one thing that's been a constant, and there'll be newer and newer methods, newer and newer ways to make payments safe, to make payments secure, to make payments convenient, and to eventually make payments something that just happens properly but seamlessly. So the next question, do you have a prediction about the balance between centralized and decentralized future digital currencies? It's hard to say, and the reason I say that is each jurisdiction, each government has a control on their economy, and therefore like can regulate their economy based on that control. For us to get to one centralized currency, or sorry, one decentralized currency that is common across the whole world, is like saying that we'll get to one language all of us will speak in the world. I think there's a place for both. I think if you look at it today, on the one hand, each country has a concept of a centralized currency. But if you look at the globe, there isn't one centralized currency. There is a protocol of exchange between the managers of those central currency around the world. So I imagine something that's going to be a bit more of a hybrid. And you will have place for centralization, you'll have places for decentralization. And what we have to do in the world of decentralization is figure out something that is probably greener than the whole concept of proof of work to be able to run that properly and do it in a way that doesn't burn the planet. And in doing so, also do something that will scale. Most decentralized systems today can't necessarily handle the transactions per second required for commerce around the world. But this is where innovation will occur. We will build new technologies, we'll build new ways of doing this. I don't anticipate a fully decentralized world because there will be need for certain kinds of controls, somebody that can hold the ecosystem accountable. And that will be through players like the governments and the regulators, and for that matter, platforms as well. So it's a hybrid future when it comes to centralized versus decentralized future digital currencies. Since payments effectively are playing a part in local economies and are therefore subject to some degree of governance, how has the payment landscape and associated legislation changed over time? Great question. In fact, this is actually a critical part of any payments ecosystem. Governance is very important for managed systems. And governance is about making sure that all parties are protected in the ecosystem. Without governance, systems can actually head in ways that you don't intend. Checks and balances are required. Those checks and balances come from various different approaches. One is platforms like us saying that, you know, we are in a long-term relationship with our customers. We don't want to do anything that breaks the trust and relationship with our customers. So we put checks and balances. On top of this, you have governments. that have laws that ensure that there is some level of governance in terms of how money is managed and moved and so on. And there are regulators, and I call them out separately because um, sometimes it's not one country government to one regulator. Like for example, in the US, you have many different regulators that govern the management and movement of money. It's a different one in New York versus one in Florida versus one in California, and so on. This is going to be critical. And what is happening is regulators are becoming a lot more savvy about digitization, about payments. And what they're bringing forth is something that's in the interest of the citizens of that jurisdiction, which is their right to privacy, their right to safe transactions and secure transactions, making sure that you don't have bad actors participating in the ecosystem, and there are ways to catch that when it happens, and ensuring overall that we are creating a safe space for transactions for everyone. This is continuously evolving. There's a lot of activity in this space. I think it'll settle over a period of time where there'll be some standards, protocols, and policies that will emerge consistently around the world. But what's happening today is it's quite diverse and varied depending on which jurisdiction you go to. We partner very closely with them. They help shape what we do. We help shape what they do. And together it's a collaboration to ensure that our customers and their citizens are protected in this process. And we build the systems that always acts on behalf of the customers and citizens. How much has COVID-19 accelerated society's transition into contactless and digital payments? Surprisingly, quite a bit. What we saw is in the early days of COVID-19, when everybody started to work and live at home, we saw a little bit of a dip. Then the first trend that we saw was people who were impacted by COVID-19 and other people who wanted to actually provide help. So we saw a lot of growth in digital giving and digital kindness. And then we saw a bump in activity in online commerce. Those that were naturally used to online commerce participated even more in online commerce because everything they did now had to happen through an online method of payment. We have now seen, as we've gone through COVID-19, even if you land at a restaurant and you have outdoor dining and so on, there's probably a QR code on the table that you scan and pay through digital means. You don't necessarily exchange cash. Same thing is beginning to happen in stores. The growth of in-store contactless has gone up too. Overall, we feel like COVID has created a bit of a step function change in the trends in digitization. In many cases, it might have accelerated a year or two of trajectory when it comes to digital payments. Even those that had resisted digital payments before have started to participate in it more. This, by the way, just to draw an analogy or a comparison to a similar event, in the 1980s, were the first time when Citibank started to put out ATMs for cash withdrawals. But in the beginning, nobody trusted the ATMs. Nobody actually took money out of the ATMs. They did not believe the machine. They would rather walk into the bank and talk to a teller and get money from their account. Then there was a blizzard, a very large blizzard in the New York area. And during that time, banks were shut down. And ATMs became the only way that people could actually withdraw cash. And that was the beginning of a surge in the popularity of ATMs. When people started to use it, they started to see the utility. They saw that it was not a dangerous thing eating their money. It was safe and it was doing what it was meant to. That's how it started to spread. And we have seen the similar things in pockets and segments of users when it comes to digital payments. And I think it's a trend that'll continue as well. Do you think when do you think we'll adopt virtual currency? It would be a globalized currency, or countries would still maintain their current currencies? Um, that's a great question. So the history of digital currencies, as we have seen them, um, they've been affected by a lot of volatility. And retail in general works on extremely thin margins. Given that, um, people don't necessarily want to transact in a digital or a cryptocurrency, um, because that volatility causes them to lose value. And therefore, folks avoid conducting commerce or shopping through these digital currencies. That said, we've already seen the beginning of the concept of stable coins. And stablecoin, as the name suggests, is to address that main problem, the one of volatility. So for example, a USDC, which is the US digital coin, which is supported by regulators, is pegged to the dollar. And that becomes a means of exchange going forward. The representation is digital, the transmission is digital, the accounting is digital, and so on. And so the fact that we solve for stability, now it'll come down to, okay, why would people use it? People will use it if they see value in it, if they see convenience in it, and if they see some level of normalization on it, as in like the ability to use it across the globe, and so on. We will begin to start to use virtual currencies, because there'll be certain shopping experiences that will enforce that you only operate through digital currencies. But slowly it'll start to gain traction. I believe that before we get to any concept of a global digital currency, it is more likely that countries will take their currencies and create digital forms of it first. And then there can be, look, I mean, at one point in time, all of Europe got together and decided that they want to have a common currency called the euro. So if it could happen in the physical world, it can definitely happen in the digital currency world too. But those are things that we'll have to wait and see, because that goes beyond just the world of payments, just the world of currencies. It goes into geopolitics and country relationships and so much more, world trade and so much more. So hard to predict on the single global currency piece, but the countries will definitely start to digitize over time. And we will see in our lifetime some use of digital currency. Maybe I'm under predicting. Maybe by the time we are done, we'll be only transacting digitally or through digital currency. We already transact digitally, I mean, through digital currencies. All right. By the way, you guys can ask any question. It doesn't have to be just about payments. Yeah, so there's a great question here that's a bit unique and diverse, so I'm going to bring that up. Where do you foresee vulnerabilities that criminals, etc., can? Ooh, the question jumped somewhere. Yeah, I think, yeah, there it is. Where do you foresee vulnerabilities that criminals, etc., can exploit in the future payment systems, and how can we mitigate their effects? This is actually one of the most important things we focus on. As I mentioned, security for companies like us is priority zero. That is where everything starts. We believe we are in the business of trust. And to uphold trust, the first thing you have to do is to make sure that the payments or money that people hold is something that we safeguard and secure very carefully. That is the most valuable asset they have, and they want us to protect it that way. We put a lot of effort and resources into cybersecurity. Part of this is to be aware of emerging trends and threat factors and so on. And by the way, threat vectors change every single day. We are probably amongst one of the most attacked companies in the world. And you have to do many different things. One is, what is the mindset of engineers at the company who are building software? As they're building software, what are the checks and balances to ensure it is secure? As they're beginning to store data, how are we making sure that all of that data is protected, not just from an access perspective, but from a cryptographic encryption perspective and so on? Are we using the most up-to-date encryption methodologies that are current and to date and ones for the future? In doing so, are we creating the right perimeters in terms of access control? In doing all this, are we ensuring that fraudsters are not able to take advantage through any kind of application compromise? There are things like insider threat in making sure that nobody can actually pose as a employee and get access to certain things. Even as an employee, that if you want access to something that goes through levels of permission requests and so on. There's a lot happening in the world of security, layered defense model, starting with volumetric protections at the top and getting down to granular data protections on the inside. And so on. And it's a fascinating world. If any one of you wants to pursue a career in cybersecurity, I would highly, highly recommend working for a payments company. It's all engineering at a payments company is fun, but cybersecurity is even more so. And a lot of innovation happening there, a lot of things that are progressing along, and a lot more to be done. In this area. Advai, I know we are at time. How do you want to proceed?
So there's two options. If you have time, then we can keep going with the live Q&A. Otherwise, I can give you the link to the RP Discord server, and people can ask questions there, or and just continue the conversation.
Yeah, so
it's really up to your preference.
I can go for a bit more. I'll take a rather simple question from the bottom. Can you explain the Stormtrooper helmet behind you? Yes, that's a Stormtrooper helmet that's there. I'm not as much of a Star Wars fan. You'll probably see a USS Enterprise right there on my 3D printer. I'm more of a Star Trek fan, and most of the pictures on my digital frame are Star Trek. The Stormtrooper helmet is to create levity in certain kinds of conversations. I have even been I report into the CEO, and in the CEO's staff meeting, in a tense moment, I'll wear the helmet and create some levity, and we have a little bit of a laugh. But it's there as a prop. It's there to make the situation we are in more human. And it was probably a Halloween costume that my son used one of the Halloweens. There's a question on, will these implicit payments mostly be pointed towards corporations concentrating the wealth? Or do you use the case of a person-to-person microtransaction in real-life transactions? Yeah, so think about ambient payments as actually a design pattern. Don't think of it as anything that is just a product by itself. It's an experience. And that experience, it's almost like, many years ago, the internet discovered the concept of infinite scroll. And now whenever you go to most sites, you have an infinite scroll. By the way, for those of you that don't know what happened before infinite scroll, what happened was you'd actually hit next page and go to the next page and the next page and so on. So ambient experiences is a design pattern. It's an experience that will be used in various different places, particularly in interaction with systems that don't have an interface outside of, say, voice at best. And it can apply in various different scenarios. We have just started to launch QR in various different markets. And for the longest time now, if you are a Venmo user, you can actually, without any touch, you can use QR between two Venmo users to exchange money. You can actually if you were to check out of a hotel and if you want to leave a tip, you can use QR to do that. All of these things are about interaction with your ecosystem, and as a part of that, conducting payment as well. There is nothing that is particularly pointed at corporations alone. Given it's a design pattern, it can apply anywhere, including the person from Salvation Army who is standing at the street corner collecting donations with maybe a QR code on a piece of paper versus actually holding a large tin can for people to drop cash into and such. It will apply to microtransactions. It will apply to all kinds of transactions. It's not just about large payments. It can be for small payments. It doesn't just have to be B2C or business to consumer. It can be consumer to consumer as well. Do you think that with the rise of digital payments, there will be a surge in third-party payment platforms? And if so, how will that affect already established companies like PayPal? You know, the way to think about the platform economy is as an ecosystem. Every company has a purpose that they're organized based on, and everything related to that purpose is what we consider as core. Everything outside of the core we consider context. And what we do is we primarily invest in the core, we partner on the context. And when you build a platform, a single platform by itself doesn't do everything a consumer needs. So it is important to think of the partnerships you have with other players in the platform. Some of them are partners in third-party platforms. For example, when we actually verify a customer, we interact with various credit bureaus around the world in ensuring that this person is exactly who they say they are, and they have a good standing and all of that kind of stuff. And similar to that, we have many different partners, right? For example, when we build infrastructure, do we go and build an operating system? No, we don't. We actually interact with the Linux open source community to use Linux as an operating system. When we want employees to exchange emails or have a chat, we use technology from players like Slack and Microsoft and so on. So there are a lot of partners that you work with, and even particular to payments, there are a lot of players that play in the ecosystem. When it comes to digitization and the management of money around the world, there is room for a lot of different players. Digitization around the world is only 20% done at best. There's 80% to go. So there's room for a lot of players. In many cases, I think this is what will lead to the greatest innovation possible. As long as a company is centered around customers and can innovate quick and get to the market and outcompete the rest of the industry, they'll continue to win. And last but not the least, it'll come down to what kind of a relationship they build with the customer over time. I think last thing I'll say on this is competition is a good thing. Competition actually makes companies more accountable, makes companies more agile, makes companies more innovative, makes companies more respectful of their customers. You don't take anything for granted. You have to earn the right to interact with your customers and serve them every single day. So I think we see new platforms emerge every day. We know what our competitive advantages are. We know what our core is. We know what our context is where we can partner. And we actually welcome the emergence of new companies and work with them collaboratively in this space. No doubt, I mean, we are a corporation, but our main purpose is actually to figure out how we create a payment democracy, if you will, a payment operating system that serves everyone equally without excluding anyone. Digital payments imply that anyone using them has access to the internet. How does PayPal plan to expand into countries where internet access is slow or uncommon? What is your plan for making sure that these tools are accessible in those places? Um, so I think I addressed this a little bit in terms of what's happening with connectivity around the world and access to connectivity and so on. You can, in most markets today, you can literally get a smart mobile phone for less than $25. If you travel around the world and go to the remotest of places, you'll see different conditions that people live in. But what you'll also see is the ubiquity of mobile phones and devices. The growth of IoT is something else to pay attention to as well. In fact, I don't know if you folks know, but either last year or the previous year, 2018 or 2019 was the first year where there were more mobile devices in the world than the number of people. Just think about that for a second. At the same time, while we have desktops, laptops, and mobile devices connected to the internet, there is a large multiple of that is available through other kinds of connected devices, which is popularly called Internet of Things. In most cases, you don't necessarily need to have a personal device eventually to get access. We know of various markets where there are community devices that are available for education, for commerce, for payments, and so on. There are organizations that are doing that on their own. And there are many other companies that are focusing on bringing the internet to the remotest of places through modern technologies as well. Everyone realizes that connectivity has become a basic right and means through which like there can be uplifting of large groups of people around the world. And as that becomes very common, probably even more so than other needs even, I think where the innovation will occur in the payments industry is how to make sure you can create reliable payments on unreliable connections and unreliable platforms. But I would say, having traveled the world a fair bit, what I'm beginning to notice is connectivity, mobile device usage is growing faster than most of us even think. Even in the remotest of places in the world, it's beginning to happen. How many of you have heard about the company called M-Pesa? Hopefully some of you have. It's actually a payments company in Africa that started doing payments over, I'll call it dumb phones, but phones before the smartphones with literally small screens and only numbers that you can type in. It turned out it was very easy to teach people like a quick short code they could use to use SMS to send money to each other. And that became extremely, extremely popular. So digitization is upon us. It's happening everywhere. It's actually becoming more and more common. Connectivity is reaching more places than it has ever done before. Mobility is reaching. Mobility as a mobile device usage is becoming a lot more common. And eventually, IoT offers an opportunity beyond mobile devices for connectivity in remote locations for people as well. All right. I think I have probably can spare 5 more minutes and I'll keep going. If you use biometrics as a means of payment, do you think the risk of the data being leaked could potentially lead to identity theft? Do you think biometric data being leaked could be even more vulnerable than payment data? Absolutely, yes. Just need great question that you asked here. There is the right way of doing biometrics and there is the wrong way of doing biometrics. It is like, for example, most of you that have a modern mobile phone probably realize that your biometrics don't actually leave your device. your biometrics are stored on the secure element on your phone, whether it be an Apple device or an Android device. Your biometrics are stored on the secure element. And what happens is a validation of that biometric stored in the secure element towards the input that is provided to that phone. It doesn't live on the servers of these companies. Now, that is the right way to do biometrics, where it is private, it's local, it is used for authentication, and it doesn't transmit around. Now, when you do that, the danger of that being stolen only happens when your device gets stolen. Now, is that possible? Of course, a device can get stolen. It happens all the time. Now, the thing about secure element is to hack the secure element is very, very difficult and almost impossible. And the storage in the secure element also has a degree of encryption that's available, which means that you need to have access to the keys to a particular identity. Then you have to get into the secure element and such. So doing biometrics the right way can actually offer a lot of benefits. That said, this is an emerging space. And there is a lot of research that's going on in the world of cybersecurity on how biometrics can be leveraged for transactions. Look, personal transaction use, you already see it. When you go into a store, use a phone to unlock your phone and pay with the wallet. Biometrics is already in use there. But face-based payments and so on, that'll take a lot more. And that is research that is happening in progress. But doing this right is critical. Leveraging the right architecture, the right design principles, the right kind of technologies, the right kind of engineering, where you have surgically accurate design and code that serves this is how you should think about biometrics. You are absolutely right in calling out that losing a biometric is far worse than losing all the money in your bank account. And you don't want to lose biometrics. And the security around that is paramount. This one is different. How do you achieve work-life balance as a CTO? Interesting question outside of payments. Thanks for asking the question. And I'm glad this is something on your mind. Balance is very critical. And I don't know, most of us think of this as work-life integration now and not necessarily as work-life balance. Earlier in my career, as a workaholic, like I went for years without vacation and worked every single weekend. And started to realize that's just crazy. I'm beginning to lose on life experiences and opportunities that I should have, not just for myself, but with my kids and my family and so on. What I do is I have a set of rhythms and rituals that I use, whether it is the time I wake up in the morning, the way I organize my calendar, what I put on my calendar and the choices I make, taking breaks during the day to step away, taking breaks over the weekend through inverting the day to some extent. As a CTO, of course, you can imagine there's a lot of work to do. So for me on a weekend, the day is all life, and later in the night becomes a little bit of work. But those boundaries. But you know, Jason, I think the most important thing that I'll put out there is awareness of yourself, knowing what you're actually trying to achieve, knowing the difference between success and satisfaction and happiness, making sure that you have the right mix of all of those things, being disciplined, making choices, sometimes tough ones, and not just being in the mad pursuit of success alone. These are ways that you can begin to create balance, and each year of experience teaches you more. You tune, so you iteratively learn, and you create space for a career and life at the same time. All right, let me take one more question for now. With other mobile payment companies such as Venmo and Zelle starting to be used more commonly, will PayPal be expanding their market besides just transferring money? Or how will you be differentiating yourself from those companies? Let me start by surprising you a little bit. Venmo is a PayPal company. It's it's probably something with our branding that most of you don't know that. But Venmo has been a part of PayPal for many, many years now. We continue to run it as a separate brand because it's got its own great following. It's a different kind of experience. It's in the portfolio of companies that are part of PayPal. And PayPal is not just in the act of transferring money. We are one of the biggest providers of online checkout. We are one of the biggest provider of subscriptions, like what you do on Netflix and so on. We are one of the biggest providers of invoicing. We are amongst the biggest providers in remittances, which is transfer of money between countries back to families that may be in a different place. Person-to-person payments, both whether it is through email, mobile phone, QR code, whatever it may be. In-store payments, actually devices that you can plug into your mobile phone that will make it a point of sale by itself. So when you think of PayPal, PayPal actually is a broad set of capabilities and a group of companies, which includes Venmo as well. And for us, the differentiation comes from a few things. One is we provide for a marketplace in payments, a two-sided network between consumers and merchants. We have more than 300 million consumers who are on the platform, and they get access to 20 million merchants that use PayPal. For those 20 million merchants, we bring 300 million consumers. And as you can imagine, this is a flywheel that continuously builds. On top of that two-sided network, we have some of the most sophisticated data science, machine learning, and AI techniques for fraud prevention. We have the highest conversion rate in checkout around the world at 88%. Our nearest competition is at 42. And then we operate in 200 markets, 100 different currencies, and serve more than 330 million customers. And last year we processed $1 trillion in payments. So we differentiate with ubiquity, scale, security, and multiple different experiences depending on the segment of the customer. That said, like we work with the ecosystem as well. We work with card networks, bank accounts, and so on. And we do everything to partner in the ecosystem to eventually serve that customer the best we can holistically, not just in one place, but across many different modalities and channels. All right, I think I'm beginning to lose my voice now. It was great to speak to all of you. I wish I could have seen all of you. As I mentioned before, we have a great internship program and a college hiring program as well. I want to thank Advai and the organizers of Reflections Projections for this opportunity, and hope this was useful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sri, for taking the time to answer all these questions, and again for speaking with us this evening. It really was an honor to have you here. And
Thank you so much, Sri. It was really amazing, the talk and the Q&A. I feel like I've learned so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Advai.
And just a quick announcement, just a reminder that this year we have a Discord where attendees can interact with each other and discuss the amazing events that we've held this year. We also have a giveaway challenge happening right now for a chance to win another $20 Grubhub gift card. So if you haven't joined that already, I'll also be dropping the invite link below. And that's a wrap for day 3 of RP 2020. So thank you so much for coming, and please tune in tomorrow for more of our amazing speakers.